Hello everybody, welcome back to Naying Neighbours. Today I am going to be repainting my double up mini Whinnies right here. I have everything prepared, and yes, I did a voiceover, but anyway, I have my paints here, my pastels, other paints here, my brushes, very tiny, and my Stanley knife, which I am going to be using to cut off the horns of the mini Whinnies, so let's get to it. Anyway, so I have already cut off the horns of 2 of the mini Whinnies, but just have to cut off the horn of 1 more because I'm going to keep one of them as a unicorn, so let's just go ahead and do that. Here's what she looks like without a horn. So without any further ado, let's get on to painting their base coat. So here's the first mini Whinnie I'm going to be doing the base coat on. I have my little old lid for paint mixing and the paint I'll be using for the base coat. I'm going to be doing a lot of layers because it's thin paint. So here's the brush I'm going to be using. So let's just get onto it. Layer 1 done, so let's move on to the other mini Whinnies for the base coat. Here is Lapis, I'm going to be working on him next. I'm going to be honest here, it doesn't look amazing, but let's move on to Flourite. So here's the mini Whinnie that I'm going to be using as just a unicorn. Here are my metallic paints. I'm going to be using red and gold. Here I thought I would just start off going straight to red, but then I decided I should probably go with a base coat first, just because it would make the colors pop afterwards. Then I did layer 2 for all of the mini Whinnies. So after 5 layers of base coat, here's what they look like. I'm really happy with them. And before jumping into the pastels and paints, I have to seal them. So here is the sealant I'm going to be using. No, this is actually not air and surface spray. This is my Liquitex matte varnish, but we just couldn't find this varnish in a squirty bottle. So we had to buy another product, pour it out, and then put the product inside of the squirty bottle so that I could squirt it onto my horses. After a bit of trying to squirt it on, I realized it didn't work, so I had to paint it on myself. So now we can move on to putting pastels onto the first mini Whinnie, which is going to be the hornless pirate. So I started applying the pastels onto my mini Whinnie, and I realized that it would show up really well in crevices on one side but not in the other, so I had to get some darker pastels and oil pastels mixed together in the hope that it would show up a little better, and it did, thankfully. I had to put a little bit of base coat in areas where the pastel was too strong and too dark, and that actually made some of the pastels stick better in places I wanted it to show up a bit more. So here's what the mini Whinnie looks like after pastels. Now, I don't have any white paint because I couldn't find any, so I'm going to be using my Posca for the mane and tail because this mini Whinnie is going to be a Palomino. Here's what the mini Whinnie looks like with the paint, and looking really nice. So I went on to going onto the eyes and the hooves, and then that mini Whinnie was completely finished. Now moving on to Flourite. I think he's going to be a bay or dark bay, depending on how it goes with the paints and pastels, so let's get straight on to him. So I'm going to be using this dark brown paint. It is a nice color, and I'm going to also be using my black and brown pastels. So I started applying the brown paint, and I only had to do 1 layer of this, which was really good because doing the amount of layers of base coat was getting really boring. So I'm glad I only had to do 1 layer of this brown because it was deep and thick, so it was really nice. And now I'm getting out my pastels to do some detail. I also have these grey tone pastels, and I'm going to be using my black. They're really good quality and really nice, so I just started applying them onto Flourite. Now here's what he looks like with the pastels. He's starting to look a bit more like a dark bay, but that's okay. Next we have to do his mane and tail, so let's get to it. Next, using my Posca, I'm going to give him a little blaze. It actually turned out to be a really big blaze, but you know what? I don't mind. It looks really good on him. Then, after a coat of sealant, Flourite was completely done. The next mini Whinnie is going to be Lapis. He's going to be a Grulo Pinto because personally I just love Grulo Pintos. I mixed up some of my base coat, some brown and some grey to make sort of a Grulo color, and it looked really good. So here is one coat. Next, I'm going to be doing this unicorn while the Grulo Pinto dries. So I just started on with one layer of red metallic paint, and it was looking a bit like the strokes were very easily showing up. Then I went back to doing Lapis with a second coat of my special formula. Now, going back to Pyrite, I realized that there was a bit of black pastel from my fingers on the mane and tail, which made it not very palomino-y. So I'm going to be trying to make this one a buckskin. I put on some grey paint onto the mane and tail and then tried to put black pastel over it, but it did not work. And after a lot of trying to make my mistakes into a feature, this is what it turned out to be. So I'm just going to be redoing the entire coat. I just started off by repainting the coat with the base layer, and I'm going to be doing a few of those and then redoing the pastels. One layer done. A lot of paint got on the mane and tail, but that's okay, I'll fix it later. Now back to Lapis. I'll be doing one last layer of the Grulo color and then I'll move on to pastels. While I waited for Lapis to dry, I did another 2 coats of the red on my unicorn. So now I'm going to be doing the gold mane and tail for the unicorn because it's going to be a red unicorn with a gold mane and tail. So let's get to it. One layer done. Now back to Pyrite, I did another layer of the base coat and it was starting to look a little better, although it still wasn't looking the best. So I'll have to do a lot more later. Now back onto Lapis, I'm going to be doing his pastels with brown and white to give him some depth before I can move on to his patches. He's starting to look really good, even without the patches. Then I pumped out some white from my Posca and began drawing the beginning of his patches. Here is what the start of it looks like. I'm going to be doing a few layers, so it's not going to look like this forever. Then I went on and did socks. Here's what they look like. And then I extended this little patch on his shoulder just to, I don't know, it just didn't look right at first, so I decided it would look nicer extended. So I fixed this part and I also added a little blotch right on his hindquarters. Now back to this guy. I only have to do 1 or 2 more layers of gold, so I went ahead and did that on his mane and he was starting to look a lot nicer, so I'm very happy with him so far. I applied another layer of the base color onto the Pyrite, and this time he's actually starting to look really good. The brush strokes weren't showing as much, and now we move back to this guy. I have to work on his patches a bit more, and I also have to do his mane and tail. So I just went ahead and did a second layer, and the patches were starting to look really, really good. So I was really happy with them. He definitely has to be my favorite out of the mini Whinnies so far. Now I'm going to be mixing up some of my reddish brown paint and my base color to make a red dun color for my buckskin. It was too dark at first because I did too much red, so I added heaps more base color and then applied it to my mini Whinnie, and it started to look really, really, really good. So I was really happy with it. Then I mixed together a tiny bit of brown and some black and started on Lapis's mane and tail. This part was so satisfying. Then I gave him a little blaze. Now back to this guy. There are a few blemishes, like all the dust collecting and this little part of paint in the leg, but that's okay. Hopefully it won't show as much when I get to all of the other stuff, but now I have to do the mane and tail. This part was especially satisfying for me. It was just so nice to see all of the little blemishes on the mane and tail to just disappear because I covered all of it with black paint. So that was really nice, and he looks so good afterwards. I also applied some pastels to him, and what was a failed palomino and a tiger looking horse turned into a beautiful buckskin mini Whinnie custom, so I was really happy with him. So then I applied some black pastel onto his legs to make it kind of look like socks. I didn't want to go straight on with black paint because the lines would just be too much. So then I attempted a dorsal stripe. It was a bit thick, but that's okay. It looks pretty good. So then I did his eyes and his hooves, and then that mini Whinnie was done. So I didn't film this part, but I put a third coat of gold and did the hooves of this mini Whinnie and sealed it, so that one was done. Now let's move back onto this guy. So I got some black and brown paint, and then I did his hooves, and then that mini Whinnie was done too. So after sealing them both, here is the final result of both my Grullo Pinto and the buckskin. And that was all the mini Whinnie customs complete. Anyway guys, that's going to be all for today's YouTube video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned because I post videos every Mondays and Tuesdays 12 PM UTC. See you next time everyone. Bye!